Welcome to everyone that showed up this afternoon, and welcome to Joy Christian Community Church. My name is Janine Coughlin, and I am a member here, and we are going to be discussing this afternoon a conversation on death and dying. The bag you received when you came in contains a little red notebook in it that you can actually take notes, questions, whatever you may have during the presentations. This afternoon, we have 4 wonderful people who have come to help us all through the experience of death and dying. We may feel it's all done by making our own arrangements, but as you will see, we really can't do it on our own. Decisions can be made easier with the knowledge we can receive. Listen to our 4 experts, and you may find that there are some things to think about. Our first speaker is Suzanne Sanchez, and she is here from Hospice of the Valley. She began her career with Hospice of the Valley in 2003 after she received her master's degree in social work from the University of Michigan. Currently, she is a community liaison person and can speak on all of the services provided by Hospice of the Valley. So, Suzanne, come on.
Hello. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you, Janine. Thank you to the church. Wow, this is such a needed conversation, and we are honored to be a part of it. It's one of those things that you kind of don't know you need it until you need it, right? So why think about it until you need it? And this just all goes in line with the conversation component between death and dying. So again, thank you to Janine, thank you, Pastor Clayton, thank you everybody here. So just really honored and privileged to share the information we have with you. I'm just going to speak a little bit about Hospice of the Valley first and kind of what we do and why we do it, and then share some of the resources that we have as well. There's a resource table up here that has information from all of our speakers today and some other community resources as well. So I'm sure it will be useful and helpful. So please do check that out when you have a moment. So first, let me just touch on hospice. Is that something you all have heard of before? Do you know what it is? Just by a show of hands, are people familiar with the term hospice? Okay, excellent. That's great. You are ahead of the game, guys. So the thing with hospice is it is a nationwide program. And so hospice, it can be different here than in other states. My family was from the Chicago area, and so we had hospice for my grandfather in Chicago, and then we also had hospice here for my grandmother at some point. So all hospices are a little bit different, but we all tend to do the same thing, or we should be doing the same thing. So, and hospice by term is technically, it's a resource for folks who are terminally ill and have been diagnosed with 6 months or less to live. Now, does that mean, gosh, I don't know when, we don't know when the date is, right? None of us have a magic ball. Nobody can tell us when that day is going to come. So that's why there's been a guideline set, and these are per Medicare instructions. So the guideline is if somebody no longer qualifies for aggressive treatment, or if they don't want it anymore. If somebody has a terminal disease or prognosis, and they're like, you know what, I think it's time. I've done what I need to do. I've been in and out of the hospital. I don't want that anymore. I want to be comfortable and I want to be in my home with my loved ones. That's when you would want to call on to hospice services. Hospice of the Valley, we are a nonprofit hospice, so we are actually the largest not-for-profit hospice in the country. And basically what that means is you do not need to have insurance. You do not need to have finances. You do not need to pay anything out of pocket for the services that we provide to you. There only needs to be a need, a medical need for it. As long as that is there and you are part of our community, and our community is Maricopa County, We do a bit of the outskirts as well in Pinal County, but we're basically in Maricopa County. If you have those requirements and you need our support, then we want to be able to give it to you. No questions asked. We don't ask if, in a lot of places, it's Medicare funded for hospice services. People will always say, well, who pays for this? How do you get paid? Medicare is the reimburser for it, and there are other than commercial insurances as well. But if, as we know, unfortunately, people and all walks of life can be affected by something terminal. It doesn't matter if you are 65 or 75 or 35. So we really do feel strongly that we just want to be able to provide the care and support for people whenever they need it, regardless of age or ability to pay. So that's out of the way. And Hospice of the Valley has been here in the Valley since 1977. So we feel very strongly our roots are here in the Valley, and we know that there's a need out there, and we just want people to know about it. So as I said earlier, it's kind of one of those things, you don't know you need it until you need it, right? So part of the conversation is talking about all of these things. So as you have these conversations with your loved ones, with your neighbors, with your congregation, with your support group, I think it's vital to talk about the things that you want towards the end of your life, because if you don't share that with anybody, nobody's going to know. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways, is that nobody will know. Sorry, I'm setting my timer because I could yap all day and I want to be mindful of your time. So again, the conversation piece is, we all know that this is going to happen to all of us at some point. It's one of those guarantees. So the more we talk about it and the more we feel comfortable talking about it, now that certainly doesn't mean anybody's looking forward to it per se, right? But we want to know what's available and the resources that can help guide us through these things. And there are tons of resources out there. It's really just a matter of making sure you're connected and aware of them. So, we've spoken a bit about the hospice end of things. With Hospice of the Valley in particular, we have our hospice program. And hospice, 90% of our patients live in their own homes still. So I kind of like to describe it as we're sort of the supporting cast and characters in the movie that is your life, right? So you're the director, you're the star, you are all the things, and you are going to tell us what you need from us, and we will honor that. Well, I have a business card here as well with my phone number on it too, so. But I certainly get that out at the end as well. And I know that we've got folks streaming in too, which is wonderful. So, but again, we really want to honor whatever decisions are yours. It's not our place to make the decisions for you. It's our role to give you the resources and to maybe guide you in that, but it is not our job to make the choices for you. We're certainly here to help have the conversation with you and help talk to your family about things. And if you're struggling or having a hard time talking to those closest to you about the things that you want, we're certainly there to help guide with that. But it is your choices. We feel very, very firmly and strongly that that's all part of maintaining one's dignity, in particular at end of life, is making sure that your choices are being honored, and we will strongly advocate for that. So I think there's a common misconception that people think when you do come on to hospice services that you can't go to the hospital anymore, or that you can no longer be a full code. And for those of you that aren't familiar, that's the do not resuscitate. Have you heard those terms? Yes, okay. So there's a do not resuscitate, and then if you don't want that, then you would be considered a full code. So if something were to happen, you were to stop breathing, and 911 is called, they would start doing whatever they need to do to revive you. You can certainly still have all that and be on Hospice of the Valley services. Again, it goes back to, what are your wishes? What are your desires? We're there to honor them. So, and again, the majority of our patients live in their own home. We come into the home and we provide care intermittently. So you would see a nurse who would come weekly, at least weekly, to go over whatever medications you need, go over any pain issues you're having, talk about whatever you need to go through in terms of the physical manifestations of whatever the illness is. We also have social workers who can come and support not just the patient, but the family as well. And family to us is whoever is important to you is important to us. So it doesn't have to be like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, how are you related? You know how in the hospital only so many people are allowed to come. If it's important to you, then it's important to us, and we honor that. So the social worker can come and really help support those psychosocial needs, provide that emotional support. These are all tough topics. And a lot of times, again, if we're not having these conversations prior, it all kind of comes to a head when that doctor says, you know what, there's nothing else we can do. And if you haven't felt comfortable enough to have these conversations, then our social worker can genuinely and truly help guide you with that. And honestly, sometimes it's the family members too, right? I've seen and had so many patients that I've been honored to care for. They're good. They know where we're going. I think we all here know where we're going, right? They have a strong faith, but it's the folks who are left behind where it's the hardest, and we really struggle with it. Nobody wants to think about life without a loved one present in it. And it doesn't need to always feel sad. Of course, it's a sad subject, but there's a way to feel empowered beyond that too. And so our social workers really do have a beautiful way of communicating that with those important to you and maybe people who are struggling. The dynamics become very, very detailed, let's say, at end of life. It's not often where it's in the movies or in television shows when we see, and it's such a peaceful gathering and there's no fighting and nobody's saying, Mom promised me that Chinette and Dad told me I was going to get this painting. You know, that doesn't seem to come up in the movies or the things that we see in the, mainstream media. But those things happen and those things come up. And so having a resource and folks to kind of help you during these processes is just such a help and a relief. I've used hospice and Hospice of the Valley for my own family, and I've worked for them for, it'll be 20 years next year. I could speak to you all day long about our programs and why we do what we do, but when I was needing it, all of that went out the window. I was being the family member. And that's kind of the beauty behind it, because I was able to. I didn't have to navigate the resources, and I didn't have to put the things together. Even though I knew I could, I didn't have to, because they were helping me. And so if I can give you the biggest takeaway with that is hospice is not it's not a curse word. It's not something to be scared of. I think it can really be viewed as a positive at a time when you maybe need some more positives in your life. Again, we don't have control over what's going to happen or how it's going to happen, but the things that we do have control over are how are we going to handle the things as they do come up. And so just being ready and knowing what the resources are out there can make such a huge difference. So with hospice services in particular, a doctor will sometimes call us up and say, you know what, I've got patient so-and-so who is needing some extra support in the home. Can you go out and make a visit? We'll say, sure, anytime. We call them, connect with them, find out what works well for them. We have neighbors who call us and say, gosh, my neighbor, Mrs. X, she lives alone. Her kids are out of state. I've just been noticing there's been some changes with her. She can't drive herself to the doctor anymore. She can't do this. She can't do that. Is there any way you can somebody talk to her? Can somebody just sort of go over the programs you have? And is there anything you can do to help? Absolutely. We're going to call Mrs. X, make sure it's okay with her. And we can come out and just go over all the various programs that we do have. So a doctor can call us and let us know if there's a need. A neighbor can call us. A loved one can call us. A family member. The patient themselves can call us and say, you know what, I need help. How can you help me? And we will come out and share with you exactly how we can do that. So hospice is our main program. That's what we started with. But since we've been here in the Valley for over 40 years, we've really seen a need for lots of other sort of programs to sort of bridge that pre-hospice time. So in doing so, and because we've been fortunate enough to be in the Valley as long as we have, we've created these other wonderful programs. We have something that's called an outreach program, a supportive care program, and that's for folks who are sort of pre-hospice needs. So it's not going to be as medically driven, but what it will do is we have a nurse come out and visit, a first initial visit, sort of go over what is happening with you or your loved one and what sort of needs they have. And then it's really taken over by one of our social workers to provide community resources. Do you need help staying in your home? What sort of things do you need in order to make that happen? Here's some great community agencies that can do that for you. Here's wonderful caregiving agencies. Here's a resource for folks to come in and help make your home more adaptable if you can't get upstairs anymore, those sorts of things. So that's called our supportive care program. And oftentimes, too, that's for folks who may have a physical need for hospice, but they're just not ready to go there yet, and they're not ready to say, I'm done. I'm ready to go on to hospice program and hospice services. I want to see what this specialist says, and I want to see what this doctor says. Absolutely. You can be on that program and still see all those doctors and still see all those specialists. Again, it's just another support for you. It's just sort of another little form of insurance, so to speak. Again, no cost. You should never receive a bill for any of our services. We also have, I'm sure you all have seen too, sort of the rise in dementia and different forms of dementia. So in our original planning of our supportive care program, it was for everybody. If you have a cancer, if you have heart disease, if you have any chronic illness, diabetes, dementia. But the longer we've been doing it, we've learned so much, and we've really seen that dementia needed to be its own program. So we actually have our own, it's called Supportive Care for Dementia Program. And it's for anybody in any stage of memory loss. It can be, you can have just been diagnosed. You can not have a formal diagnosis, but a doctor has said, you know what, I'm seeing some things here. Let's pull in some more resources. So same thing, we have a dementia educator who's a social worker who will come out to the home, go over all the various resources that one might need, look at the things like throw rugs or things that might be triggers for future impairments or issues down the road for somebody with memory loss or memory impairment. And it's a great support for the family because I think being a caregiver in any way, shape, or form is probably one of the hardest things any of us have been able to do. And then when you throw in dementia on top of it, it just makes it that much more complicated. So it's really a wonderful, wonderful resource. We also have a mobile physician group that's under the Hospice of the Valley umbrella. It's called Geriatric Solutions, and that is for folks who truly are home-based, so unable to get out of your home to go to your doctor, unable to get out of your home to go to the grocery store, those sorts of things. And practitioners can come to you and do whatever you need to have done in your home. So, and that is insurance-based, so we have all the qualifications and all those things. You're more than welcome to call, reach out to me or to us in general, and we can sort of walk you through that if that is a need. But we have so many other programs. I can't take up a whole hour, and I could. But we have a pediatric program. We have a pulmonary disease program. We have perinatal support. We have lots of different resources. And again, no cost, open to the community. We want to be able to serve you in whatever way that you need. So I hope this has been helpful. If there's any quick questions I can help with, if not, my information is here on the resource table. Yes. Absolutely. Yes, yes. Grief support. Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up. Yes, we do. So, a lot of times when I was talking with Rose, or I was talking with somebody earlier today, speaking about hospice and that, so many of us think that when the patient or the loved one dies or passes, that's it, everybody's out and then you're kind of on your own, which in a way you are, don't get me wrong. But Hospice of the Valley, we provide ongoing bereavement or grief support after your loved one has passed. So, and we know within that first year, there are so many firsts that happen that can really be jarring and make it such a difficult difficult progression for you as the remaining loved ones here. And so we have grief counselors who can come into the home to help support you. We can do things via Zoom. We have community support groups, and also via Zoom now too. You know, life has changed quite a bit in the past 3 years, right? So we have all these other resources, no longer just in person, but a lot of things can be done over the phone and or video as well. But yes, and a lot of people say like, well, do we only have the grief support for a year after? Typically it's a year or so, but if somebody's struggling and needing extra time, that's our job. There's no way we're going to leave somebody in need without. And so we will continue however long it needs to happen. So thank you for asking. Yes. Well, again, we're not profit, and we've been in the Valley for quite some time. So we've been very blessed and lucky to have amazing patients and families. A lot of times people will pass and then they will bequeath quite a few things to Hospice of the Valley and want to make sure that because we were able to help them through their passing, that they want to make sure that continues on. We have an amazing grant writer. So we do a lot of, there's a lot of outside funding that comes in to really serve the mission for us, which it all comes down to providing comfort and dignity to those at the end of life. And all of these things encompass that, so. Well, thank you again so very much. My name is Suzanne Sanchez. It's been a pleasure. Again, there's so much information up here. Please don't forget to get some. And feel free to reach out to me directly. And I'd love to help you all if I can. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is a local person. It's attorney Tate Elke. He's lived in Fountain Hills since 2007 and is the owner of Fountain Hills Law Firm. And his practice includes estate planning, personal injury, and criminal defense, which we don't care. In addition to his law practice, Mr. Elke serves as a judge for the East Valley Regional Veterans Court. He has even been on our town council and vice mayor of Fountain Hills. Plus, he was in the Marine Corps, and he looks pretty good in his uniform. Mr. Elke helped me when my husband passed away recently, prepare a trust, and I trust him implicitly. Tate.
I'm going to try this wireless microphone. Can everyone hear me okay? We're good to go? Okay. Well, thank you very much for that ringing endorsement, Janine. And I just want to give a shout out to Suzanne Sanchez. I've had a number of clients that have used Hospice of the Valley, and they're just phenomenal and remarkable, and family members that have come and talked to me afterwards when their loved one has passed, and they have nothing but wonderful things to say about Hospice of the Valley and the support that they've provided and continue to provide to them after their loved one passed. Whenever I'm speaking with clients about setting up an estate plan for them, more often than not, they tend to focus on, okay, when I'm not here, how do my children or how do my heirs get my assets? How do they avoid probate? Because for most people, probate's a dirty word. It's a 4-letter word for a lot of people. And what I like to focus on, I mean, we focus on that, but what I like to bring up and discuss is to make sure that they're putting things in place so that their loved ones or those people that they trust have the ability to manage things for them while they're still alive. If perhaps temporarily or permanently they become incapacitated and are unable to manage their healthcare decisions, their financial decisions, managing their finances to provide for long-term care needs and the like. Statistically speaking, most of us in the room here are going to have a period of time in our life where we're going to be incapacitated. We're not going to be able to handle things for ourselves. Hopefully that's towards the end of life, and it's not something that occurs like some type of accident or something like that. But you will need someone to have the ability to make decisions for you if necessary. So what I want to do is I'm going to cover some of the documents that I prepare in a comprehensive estate plan and explain what each one does. If you're like most people, you have a primary residence. You might have, if you're a snowbird, you might have a residence in your home state. You have bank accounts, investments, retirement accounts, vehicles, maybe a dog, cat, depends on the type of person you are, and children or other heirs that you intend on leaving whatever assets that you have when you pass. Well, first, one of the documents I prepare is a HIPAA release. That is Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It allows for whomever you name on that document the ability to communicate with your doctors. Now, this is not a decision-making document. This is just a release that just authorizes communication and perhaps access to medical records and information. Another document that I prepare is a living will. It's an advanced health care directive that spells out the type of care you do and don't want to receive if you were in a coma, for example, or if you were temporarily unable to make your own health care decisions. Now, this is often confused with a DNR. Suzanne talked about a DNR. A DNR is a do not resuscitate. A DNR has to be signed off on by your physician or one of your doctors that has gone over it with you, has explained the ramifications of it, and feels confident that you understand what it entails. A DNR, for the most part, states, and there's a variety of different ways that you can construct them, but it basically states, if I go, let me go. Don't take, any extraordinary steps. Don't try and save my life. If you code, Suzanne had mentioned, if you don't have a DNR, then they'll still try and resuscitate you. But a DNR is essentially states, don't resuscitate me. If I go, I go. Keep me comfortable, but let me go. A living will is different in that it states at all times, provide me with all the care, therapies, treatment, surgeries necessary to treat whatever my condition may be. However, if I am later, after reasonable attempts and care have been made, if I am found to be in a persistent vegetative state of coma and there's no reasonable likelihood of me recovering, then in that situation, if I pass if I stop breathing, my heart stops, allow me to pass in that situation, but keep me comfortable again with pain medication or pain relieving procedures. There's a clear distinction there. I've even heard some hospital personnel use the term when I have a client going in for a hip replacement. They'll say, do you have a healthcare power of attorney and a DNR? I said, well, no, you don't have a DNR. I mean, if you stop breathing on the operating table, you want them to save your life, right? You're like, yeah, I do. Okay, well, you don't want a DNR right now, so here's your living will. This is what you want. Another important, and in my opinion, probably the most important document out of everything that I prepare in an estate plan packet is a healthcare and mental health care power of attorney. Now, that document allows for whomever it is that you've named, and I will typically ask for 3 people to be named, and you can name them chronologically. You might name a spouse, a child, and then another child, or other family member to be able to act on your behalf. I usually like to have backups, just in case the first one can't do it, the second one doesn't want to do it, or is incapable of doing it for some reason, and then at least you've got a third. What the healthcare and the mental health care power of attorney does, it allows the persons that you've designated, which is known as your agent, the ability to make healthcare and mental health care decisions for you. I will typically draft them in such a way where they're effective immediately on signing. I witness, my staff notarizes, and making them effective immediately as opposed to what's called a springing power of attorney. A springing power of attorney is something that says, well, I'm giving these powers to this person, let's just say your spouse or one of your children, but they will only be able to exercise these powers if I'm incapacitated. Now, in defining incapacity, you're going to have some language in there that states, one of my doctors has stated in writing that I can't make healthcare or mental health care decisions, or two doctors who have examined me. But you can even have an incapacity panel that includes a close family member that all have to agree that you're incapacitated. Well, what I've found over the years is sometimes it's difficult, especially post-COVID, to get a doctor to examine you, to write a letter, to state that you're incapacitated. Sometimes it's difficult to get the person in there. You know, if you've had a parent that you've looked after that needed care that may have been suffering from Alzheimer's or some form of dementia, it's difficult perhaps to get them in to see the doctor. And if they're kind of on that borderline, when they see the doctor for the 15 minutes, they may not exhibit the signs and symptoms that you see on a daily basis, that you see when you spend, a long period of time with them. So by making the healthcare power of attorney effective immediately, you can then allow for the person that you've named to navigate with you and be able to make healthcare decisions with you. And that could be in conjunction with you, or it could be making decisions if you are unconscious, and then you regain consciousness, and then you take over and you make your own decisions. I've just found from a practical standpoint, it just works much better than having a springing power of attorney. Now, that's a mental health care power of attorney. That's intended to cover everything from picking up a prescription from you, surgeries, procedures, long-term care, short-term care, memory care, any type of psychiatric care that may be needed, and end-of-life decisions if necessary. Next document would be a financial power of attorney. Financial power of attorney is intended to cover everything for you that you might need somebody to act on your behalf from a financial standpoint, to deal with banking, filing your tax returns, dealing with your retirement account, like an IRA that will be in your name until you pass, and then it transfers to your beneficiaries. If you have real property that's in your name, perhaps selling real property to pay for your long-term care. Seeking out benefits, whether that's through Medicare, or Social Security, or pension benefits that you may have earned from a past employer. So that's where a financial power of attorney is in place, or what a financial power of attorney is used for. The financial power of attorneys and the healthcare powers of attorney that I prepare are very extensive and lengthy, and they're intended to cover all manner of situations that may come up. I often get feedback from clients who say, I don't have any cattle interests. I don't have any mineral rights, unfortunately. I don't have any oil in Texas or anything, because I include those powers in there. Well, it's intended to cover all range of things, and I'm often updating and changing and tweaking them just to conform with what might happen, and I'm constantly doing continuing legal education and learning newer practices and things of that sort. So it's kind of, the analogy I use sometimes is I'll put all these powers in there. If they're not used well, that's fine, they're not needed. It's kind of like perhaps having a gun and not needing it. It's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, because the alternative is if that power is not built into that document, whether it's the financial or healthcare power of attorney, the third party that your agent's dealing with, whether that's a bank or Edward Jones or Fidelity or your doctor at the hospital, if it isn't specifically laid out in there, they're not going to allow them to exercise it. So it has to be specifically stated, because it's a liability thing, is really what it boils down to. Another document as part of an estate plan is a will. Now, if you have a trust, you'll have what's known as a pour-over will. Pour-over, P-O-U-R, and what it's intended to do is to catch any assets that are part of your probate estate, if there are any. If it's a properly funded trust, there won't be any, but if there are any, it's intended to catch them and pour them over into the trust. When you have a trust, whether it's an individual trust or a joint trust, that is the document that spells out who gets what and how. We often talk about our wills, and our wills spelling out your beneficiaries, whether it's a surviving spouse, children, or other heirs. When you have a trust, the trust is the controlling document. Now, if you just have a will, over the years, my opinion and advice has changed. Often I'll have potential clients that will come in to meet with me, and they'll tell me, well, look, I just wanted something simple. I just want a 2-page will. I don't want anything too complicated because I have a simple estate. And as I sit down and talk with them more, I find out as with life with everyone, it's never straightforward and simple. And the more that I've done this, the more that I find that no one has a perfect family, a perfect life in this situation where we have a situation where they're disinheriting all of their kids. They got 4 kids, and there's been a breakdown, or there's blended families, where someone has a second marriage where they both brought in children to the relationship, and they want to provide for their respective children, and things of that sort. So when someone tells me I just want a simple will, I say, okay, well let's talk first. Let's find out about your family, your finances, your wishes. And often I will recommend setting up a trust, even for what we would call a simple estate. And that would be, again, somebody that just perhaps has one primary residence, a couple bank accounts, a vehicle, maybe some investments, personal property. And the reason being is a trust is a lot more flexible in that if you have changes in circumstances and dynamics. I've had one client in particular that I can think of. She's a widow. She was married for many years. Her husband passed. She has 2 kids. I think she's taken her daughter in and out of her estate 6 times now, where she'll call me, I want to change the trust. My daughter is behaving in such a way that I want to take her out. I'm like, okay, we'll change that. So we do an amendment. Maybe 6 months, 9 months, a year later, she calls me again. Okay, yeah, we're talking again. I want to put her back in. So what it boils down to is just a simple amendment, to that trust, which is typically a 2-page document. And the trust holds all of her assets. So the house is transferred in. Just think of it in terms of a bucket. The house is transferred. It's held by the trust. You can still sell it. You can still do with it whatever you want. You can give it away, borrow against it, whatever it is that you choose. Bank accounts titled into the name of the trust or transfer into the trust upon your passing. Personal properties assigned to the trust. Brokerage accounts. Depending on your circumstances, we might have the trust be the beneficiary of an IRA or 401k. That'll really depend. There's some tax consequences there, but that might be the case. Often it's going to be the surviving spouse and your children. But again, any assets that are part of your trust are not part of your probate estate. So if the house is in the trust, the bank's account is in the trust, all your personal properties in the trust, there's nothing that's out here in the probate that needs to go through the court process. The nice thing about the trust, too, is that they are private. No one knows. It's not involved in the court process. They're not filed with the county recorder's office unless you choose to do that, and I don't recommend doing that because it's revealing confidential information, whereas a probate process is public. It's part of the court. In its most basic, description, whenever somebody goes through the probate process and they're saying, well, my parent passed and I'm the executor under their will, what you as the executor are doing when you go to the court is you're asking the court to recognize you as the executor, to give you what are known as letters of appointment as an executor, or here we call it a personal representative in Arizona. Most people know it as an executor. And the judge bestowing the power on you to deal with creditors, to deal with selling real property, to deal with banks and other financial institutions, to say, I have the power to do these things. Whereas the trust, you're building and putting those powers and authorities in advance, and those are already built into the trust. So instead of going to the court to ask a judge to give you the power and authority, you're showing the bank, or you're showing title if you're selling the house. I'm the successor trustee of the trust, and in the trust you can see under this article, this section, it specifically states that I have the authority to sell the house. I have the authority to do these things, which are not only when you pass away. It could be while you're alive, and if you couldn't manage things for yourself. So it makes it much easier for whomever it is that's managing the trust on your behalf to do those things for you without, again, having to go to a court to ask for permission to do these things in the form of a conservatorship, perhaps, if you didn't have other documents in place. So now, with my office, I will, and I have a flyer here from and some cards. With my office, if you call, we set up a free consultation. There's no obligation. I don't quote over the phone as far as how much it's going to cost because everybody's different, their circumstances and the time that it's going to take. But generally what I'll do is I'll meet with you, it'll be like up to an hour, hour and a half typically, get some information from you, and then I'll make some recommendations, quote what it would be to put everything together. I'll typically charge flat fees so you know exactly what it's going to be. And then if there's any information that we still need from you, we send you an email or letter, whatever works best for you. Once we have that information, we get a draft of the documents together and then have you come in and I review them with you to make sure you understand it before you sign anything. As far as there are certain assets that can pass outside the probate process and outside of having a trust, such as life insurance. If you have a beneficiary named on a life insurance policy, that'll pay directly to them. There's no probate in that. There's no probate with an IRA. Again, if you have beneficiaries on that or a 401k, certain bank accounts you can do transfer on death as well. But that'll all depend. Everybody's unique in their circumstances and family's different, so it'll really depend on what your needs are. Some of the common questions I get is, my daughter called me and says to make it easy, I should either transfer my house to her or put her on the deed. Both of those situations are 99.9% of the time bad ideas. Because one, if you gift the house away and you later need some type of Medicaid benefits because you've run out of other assets, Medicaid is going to look at that as a gift, and they're going to look, and there's what's called a 5-year look-back period, and they're going to say, well, you gifted that, so you're going to have to wait a little while before you can qualify. Potential, taxes on the gift, but by adding somebody to your property as well, they own it with you now. And when they own it with you, that means if you decide you want to sell it, you need their signature on it as well. You need their permission as well to sell the house. And if they get sued for something, then your house could be liened if they get a judgment against them, or if they go through a bankruptcy or a divorce or something like that. So there's other tools and other mechanisms to put into place to ensure the transfer of that. And I understand the idea behind it. It's like, well, I just want to make sure that it doesn't go through probate and there's no problem with that. The other thing too is if there's more than one child and you're putting the daughter on there, you pass, well, the daughter's the owner of the house. It's not part of your probate estate, and you may assume that your daughter is going to be fair to her brother and give her brother half of it, but not always the case. And you specifically putting into place what your wishes are is extremely important. I heard Suzanne made mention about, when someone passes, some of the things that she's seen, and she referenced, what we see in the movies. I really push my clients as much as I can to make sure that they have conversations with their children, especially children that are alienated or kind of on just speaking, terms, to make sure that they have a conversation with them about what they've put in place, what their wishes are, why the son is getting 60% and the daughter's getting 40%. Don't let them find out after you're gone when they can't ask questions. And also, some of the things that I see are not always financial disputes. You have a family heirloom that's been passed along, and there's only one. Let's say you've got 2 daughters, 3 daughters. Mom's only got 1 engagement ring. She's only got 1 wedding ring. She's only got 1 watch that she got from her grandmother that she knows all 3 of the daughters want. The last thing, and I hear this often, well, let them figure it out. They can, no, that's such a bad decision. You either need to make you need to make the decision. You as the parent in that example, and this could be for any beneficiaries, but you as the parent in that example have to make the decision because you don't want to leave a scenario where your children are fighting over something. And it could just be something not really worth anything monetarily, but it causes fractures in the family. And if there was there was also, if there was already a little bit of dissent and jealousies, when mom's gone, gloves come off because you're the glue that keeps them together. So making sure that you're making those decisions. And with the documents I prepare, I do have, if we're not including it in the trust or the will, there's what's called a memorandum for distribution of tangible personal property for those items. So that could be firearms, that could be jewelry, other heirlooms, photo albums, family Bible, whatever that might be. So it's really important for you to make those decisions and then to have conversations with the kids and say, hey, you better speak up. If you want something, you better say it. And don't put your fingers in your ears and go, la, 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 you don't want to think about when I'm not here, because that's going to come, for all of us at some point or another. So having those open conversations, which can be difficult at times because we're talking about our own mortality, but that will ensure the relationships that your children and other family members have, and it makes sure that you're not leaving a mess behind inadvertently because you don't want to make the decision and hurt somebody's feelings. So it's just really important. I don't mean to belabor that, but that is one that often comes up. And when we have the conversations, that's one of the topics that we would discuss as well. So talked for a while here. I'm not sure how long it's been, but I'd like to take this opportunity if there's any questions that we have. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. That's correct. I will repeat the question for the stream. Yeah. Yeah. So is that? Yeah. So the question was regarding a beneficiary deed and how does it work? They're known as ladybird deeds in other states as well. A beneficiary deed is a deed that's recorded in advance. So I may say, when I die, let's say I'm the sole owner of my home, I file a beneficiary deed that says when I, effectively on my death, I give my house to Janine, for example. Now, she has absolutely no interest in the house until I pass, and that's assuming I haven't revoked it before I pass. The only thing that she would need to do, assuming she survives me, is that when I pass, is she would record my death certificate, and that would trigger the beneficiary deed at that point. Those can work in limited situations. The thing that where you run into problems if there's multiple beneficiaries, let's say you got 3 kids and these 2 don't talk to this one, by using that, then you're forcing them to have to come to agreement for the sale of the property. Or if one says, hey, I want the house, I want to buy you out. Well, no, I want the house, I want to buy you out. That's where that can come in. Whereas if it's in a trust, whoever the successor trustee is, you spell out, if you say, hey, look, I will give them right of first refusal, and if more than one wants it, they can flip a coin or we'll do something, to see who gets the first option. But otherwise, the successor trustee doesn't have to get the beneficiary's consent on the sale of the property if they're all just getting their equal share. They just have to make sure that they're getting fair market value for the property because they have a fiduciary duty to ensure that the beneficiaries are getting fair share. So, and the other thing too with that is this is often where my clients will say, well, I give to my children, but if one of my children were to predecease me, God forbid, then it goes to their child or children equally. And they've got minor children. So we don't want minor children on a deed. So where a trust can hold that minor child's share until they reach an age that you've selected for distribution. So it provides that breakdown, so you can go down a level or 2. Or if you say, look, I've just got one child, that child doesn't have any children. If that child were to predecease me, well, it goes to this charity, Hospice of the Valley, for example. Then that makes for easy transition as well. So does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? Anything else? Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. A revocable trust is a trust, let's say it's an individual trust. It's just one person that's created it. A revocable trust is one that you can amend, you can change, you can adjust it throughout your lifetime, assuming you have the mental capacity to do so. You can have the same for a joint trust. It could be a revocable trust where you can specify that will allow both of us acting together to amend it and change it during our lifetimes. And then you can also, when one passes, you can allow the survivor to amend it and change it. Or when one of you passes, you can make it irrevocable in that the surviving spouse can't change it or amend it. Irrevocable meaning you can't change who the beneficiaries are, you can't change terms of distribution, things of that sort. Irrevocable trusts can also be used in situations for tax planning where you're divesting yourself of the interest in that trust, where you're setting it up. Let's say you have a sizable estate, or you have money, you sold some business interests, and you have a large chunk of money that you don't really, I don't want to say you don't need, but you want to set aside in an irrevocable trust where you're divesting yourself of it, and it's for the benefit of whatever the beneficiaries, and those could be your children or grandchildren, and that's legacy planning. And that irrevocable trust, even though you're still alive, you can't change it, you can't revoke it. So that's another example of an irrevocable trust. Any other questions? Well, again, I want to thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Janine, and thank you, Pastor, for allowing me to come speak to all of you and those that are live streaming as well. As I mentioned, if you'd like to set up a consultation, you can take one of my cards up here. Give my office a call. My staff will be happy to set that up with you. And happy to sit down and answer any questions that you have. Thank you very much. Huh? All right.
We have two more, but the next one, our next speaker, is Mark Jacobson, who is here on behalf of the Neptune Society. He has been the local prearrangement manager for 10 years, and he told me in his biography that he's lived in Arizona for 40 years. So he has seen the fountain go up and down all that time since 1984. Mark is going to be talking to you about cremation and a little bit on regular burial, I believe, as well, too. So come on up, Mark.
Hey, thanks, everybody. Appreciate it, Pastor Clayton, Pastor Shields, and Janine for inviting me out here today, and everybody that's also viewing. And also to our veterans. I know Tate was a veteran, and all the veterans as well. It is officially a Veterans Day today. So what I thought I'd talk about a little bit today is some options you have for the true end of life, and some of the things that many people don't like to talk about a whole lot, because there are choices we have and important choices that, if they are made ahead of time, can be very beneficial. My company, Neptune Society, we specialize in people that want to pre-plan for their final affairs, specifically cremation. But you can also pre-plan for classic burial and classic funeral services and anything else that you want to pre-plan for. And there's some differences between doing it ahead of time and then waiting till the death occurs to take care of these things, and some major implications it can have on our family members as well if we do or don't have something set up. Because most everybody knows about wills and trusts and things that were discussed today. Not as many know about the decisions that need to be made about what we're going to do at the time of our passing that can have, major impact on our families. And so the choices there are, obviously you can make, again, the choice to set something up ahead of time, would be called a pre-need plan, whether that's cremation or a full-service burial, versus after we pass away, it's called at need, because we already need it and it needs to be done right then. There's many advantages to doing something ahead of time. And I'm going to talk more generically than about my company, even though I think we're fantastic, of course. But when you plan ahead of time, it can take so many things off the table for our family members. As Tate had mentioned, there can be major disagreements with family members as far as how the estate is going to be divided and all of the things like that. But it can happen just as readily for whether there's 3 children and mom passes away and father's gone, did mom want to be cremated? Did she want to be buried? Did she want to have a classic funeral service at a church? Did she want to have a celebration at home? Nobody knows. And there's differences of opinions and can literally tear families apart, especially the children. And there's legalities involved as well that can have a major impact on the family. There is technically a pecking order for who can make these decisions if something is not in writing. And it can be in writing in several ways, potentially. It can be in writing sometimes through a will, power of attorneys, but also a proper pre-plan will list what the wishes are of the person that has it, and the family would tend to abide by those. So it can take a tremendous amount of burden off the family, especially the classic families if there's a couple kids and there's disagreements. And that's one of the main reasons people will plan ahead of time. You don't have to be sick. Our company, we've been doing the same thing for 50 years now, have close to 1 million living clients. And our parent company, which is a much larger funeral organization, we probably have 3 million living clients that have pre-plans of one kind or another. The bulk of them aren't sick whatsoever. The bulk of the clients that we deal with that they call, I'm looking into this, I'm not sick, I'm not planning to die anytime soon. We say, well, that's good, we don't want you to. But you can plan ahead, and more people are learning about it. And so they're starting to learn that they can get these things set up. And then, of course, people are ill sometimes and need to have something set up right away. Hospice of the Valley, we work with them all the time. And from our standpoint, what we know, if somebody goes into a hospice situation, one of the things on the list that almost all hospices will give them is, who do we call when your loved one passes away? So even as good as the hospices are, now the family's got to get together, kind of the last minute, figure out who are they going to call, who do they pick, who's going to pay for it, who's going to do this, who's going to do that. It can be a tremendous burden, even though you might have some time. Even worse if we wait until after a loved one passes away, and now we don't know what to do at all, because right away you have to make a decision, call some company, some funeral home, cremation company to come out and take the loved one into their care and start the process under duress. It'd be like your air conditioning goes out and you don't know an air conditioning person, who do you call? Then you're just kind of scrambling, or a plumber or something like that. So this is one of those things that if we do take care of things ahead of time, it can take so much off the plate for the family. We plan for so many other things in life. We have insurance on things that might go wrong. We might be saving money for vacations that we're going to take. We might be planning for some medical procedures. And all these things kind of might happen. But when we're talking about death, unfortunately, we know that is going to happen. And so planning for that can certainly be a major advantage. Having a plan ahead of time, of course, you're prepared. The families are prepared. I'll say the classic kids can know the wishes, the spouse can know the wishes, the brothers or sisters can know the wishes, the nephew or niece, if you don't have any direct siblings, can know the wishes. Just tremendous advantages to doing so. There's full service. Another thing that happened if you're planning correctly with the right kind of a company, your costs will also be locked in. You can. Our company, for example, we do what are called trust plans. It's not a trust like Nate was talking about earlier, but it just means a portion of the money goes into a bank trust that protects your costs, guarantees the costs won't go up. We have clients that right now, for example, they bought plans in the 80s and they're still alive, and they paid a fraction of what it costs now, but since it's a guaranteed trust plan, nobody in the family has to pay any extra money in 2023. And the same thing would hold true with somebody on a new plan today. 10 years from now, if the costs go up 50% or 100%, who knows with the cost in today's world, nobody would have to pay any extra money. That can also be done through a full-service funeral home as well. Those are typically what are called insurance-funded plans, where you would have to purchase an insurance policy to pay for the service at the time. So you pay the insurance company separately, and the funeral home would become the beneficiary of that policy. So that's another very common way that people will pre-plan. And you can pay in advance for a tremendous amount of services for those that want a classic burial with a classic funeral and things like that. You can typically pre-plan for those as well, just so you know there is a choice there. Also, what would happen at the time when you do have a plan in place, for example, on our plans, we have the information on the loved one we need so we can start right away with all the regulatory paperwork that has to be done at the time. Because there's permits that have to be gathered, death certificates have to be filed, and we would already have the information that we need that the family members might not have easy access to. There's lots of things we need, where people were born, our parents' names, even if they're no longer with us, where they were born, work we used to do, all sorts of different things that go on the permits and the regulatory paperwork. So that's in place, takes all that duress off the family as well. And of course, hopefully the obvious thing is the family can take care of each other at the time of passing rather than making all these decisions. They'll call the funeral home, they'll call us, whoever's taking care of the loved one. The family can grieve in the way they need to or celebrate the life the way they need to and not have to make all these immediate decisions and as far as what's going to happen at all. Another little advantage of planning ahead, kind of on the business side of it, is that you can make payments if you're planning ahead. After the fact, after we pass away, there's really no way to do a payment plan unless you get your own loan or use your own credit card. But virtually no funeral homes will do a payment plan for you themselves after the fact. It's just not out there right now. But ahead of time, you can make payments too, which helps many people plan ahead of time if they want to do a payment plan on it instead. As I mentioned, I think a second ago, that most of the clients we have, again, are healthy and happy. It's just a perfect tie-in to setting up a trust, setting up a will, setting up any other things that you have for your estate purposes. It's kind of separate. When you have a consultation on a pre-plan, we can also kind of help guide you on what's going to happen, with the ashes at the time, who we can contact at the time, because there are estrangement issues with family members and adult children that need to be dealt with. And it's just another process that can really help get through those things and make it easy on everybody. Because there's definitely a legal pecking order if we don't have anything set up. And not to go into the estate part and the trust part, but I think probably everybody's seen on the news over the years where some famous person passes away and, quote, they don't have a will. They don't have anything set up. And then it's just a mess for the family. It's a mess for the estate. It takes years to get things resolved. It's a lesser level when it comes to our deaths at the time, but the same thing can happen where if something isn't in place, that person could be in kind of a dormant state for weeks while the family's battling out what's going to happen, whether they're going to be cremated, whether they're going to be buried, because there's rules and things that have to be signed off on. So a lot of good advantages for taking care of these things ahead of time. Keeps the family in place, stops the disputes, can control the costs at the time. And we have many people that aren't concerned about costs or anything else like that, but they just want to know who to call. They want their kids to know who to call at the time. And it makes it so easy for them. We feel very honored and blessed how many, I'm not going to say repeat customers, that wouldn't make a lot of sense, but family members that we've helped and they've seen the process, and then the kids do a pre-plan as well because they saw how we took care of mom or dad or brother or sister, and they said it was so easy because there's virtually nothing they have to do, and they want to get something set up so their kids don't have to worry about it. And so we have clients now regularly in their 50s, even in their 40s, that are perfectly healthy because they want to get this set up and taken care of. So once again, kind of to recap, the pre-planning is a fantastic idea, and we have a choice of cremation or burial, we all do. If you don't have a choice on that yet, then it's probably even more important to talk to our families about what you want or your loved ones want, rather than after the fact, it's too late. And when things are written down, it can really, really, really help everybody get through a rough time. It's typically not a good thing when people pass away. Dealing with a case right now where a friend of mine passed away, and I guided him on, he had a strange daughter, and was concerned about who's going to kind of help with things at the time and where the ashes go. And he had really nothing set up outside of our plan. And we were able to guide him on getting a power of attorney set up because he didn't feel he could reach the daughter. Has a power of attorney in place now. Otherwise, it would have been, there'd be a delay and all sorts of other issues on getting the cremation done for him. It could be weeks. So, but having something set up really helped ease that burden on his friends that were still with him at the time. But that's kind of the simple recap of some of the choices that are out there. Again, we specialize in cremation and keeping things nice and simple for our families. We don't really specialize in major funeral services, but those can be done and they can be planned for ahead of time as well. Just not our niche. But with that, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Yes? Yeah, the question was, if you're an organ donor, does that fall into our area? Absolutely. What would happen is that if, let's say if somebody had a pre-plan with us or most any place else, when the organ donor facility is done, then we would take over. It's a very smooth transition, working with them very regularly. Yes, sir? No, it's not. Our name, Neptune Society, does come from, our company started being famous for scattering ashes out in the ocean, Neptune, the Sea of God. And we still do that, and that's still an option. Don't have to do that at all. People can retain the ashes, they can go to a cemetery, they can stay at home, they can be scattered on land, whatever somebody wants. All right, well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate the time today. Janine?
We have one more. Pastor Shields Smith is well known to us here at Joy Church. He fills in when Pastor Clayton goes on vacations or takes a day off, and we really enjoy. He has been a pastor since 1975 and has served congregations in New Mexico, Colorado, and Oregon. And Oregon, where'd that come from? Arizona. Sorry. We are always inspired by the messages Pastor Shields gives us, and I am looking forward to what you have to say today. Pastor Shields.
Hey. First of all, I think it's more than just appropriate to give Janine a hand for putting all this together. I know that her year has not been easy, and that much of what brought her to this place of wanting to make this offering is a result of her challenges in dealing with the passing of her husband. So it's great to be able to be a part of this. And again, thank you so very, very much. Okay, so if we were to put a couple words to what we have already heard, those words might very well be prepared. Amen? Be prepared. From my own experience, before we go any further, I will say to you, it is never any fun for anyone if that preparation has not taken place. If all of a sudden this has happened and the family's notified and the word gets out, we're meeting at such and such a funeral home and we need to all sit down and figure this out, that's not good. That's not good. My mother, when she called us after the passing of our father, we walked into the nursing home, we sat down at a table, she pulled out an envelope, opened up the envelope, and my father had written down there everything that he wanted done. It made it just so very much easier than it would have been had we not had that piece of paper. So be prepared. That is the key to today. And if it exists for the first three, it also is there incumbent upon me to do the same with you now, that you be prepared. But this time from a spiritual point of reference. And so I have three ways in which we need to be prepared today. The first one is to acknowledge and accept our accountability. To acknowledge and accept our accountability. Paul, writing in Romans, the 6th chapter, says, the wages of sin is death. The wages of sin is death. I look at that, the word wages, and then death, and in pondering that, it comes to the realization that sin is the currency that is used, oddly enough, strangely enough, weirdly enough, to what? To purchase death. Think about that. See, there's nothing, no matter how hard we work, no matter how much we do to change things, we're going to die. And the reason we're going to die is because of sin. So death is not the problem. Sin is the problem. The first thing we need to do is understand that, and accept accountability for the fact that we are not healthy people. We are sick people. We have a spiritual disease, and that spiritual disease kills us, certainly bodily, and if we're not careful, it will also kill us spiritually. I don't want that for you. I don't want that for me. I don't want that for my family, my kids, my brothers, my sisters, my neighbors. I don't want that for anybody. Yes, we are going to die physically, but we don't need to die spiritually. We need to accept accountability for our condition. Again, the problem is not death. The problem is sin. The wages of sin is death. Number two, we need to say what we mean and mean what we say. If I say, I believe that Jesus Christ died for me, I better well mean it. Amen? I mean, I can say, for a lot of different reasons, maybe to get somebody off my back, maybe to please a family member or a friend or whatever, I might say that I believe, but it's all about hiding the fact that I really don't believe. There can be people in church on Sunday morning who say they believe, who seem to demonstrate that they believe by being there. And I talked about that last Sunday a little bit with the funeral director. Remember the funeral director? You were here on Sunday. I talked about the funeral director who waited until the very last minute to walk into church so that everybody would ask the question, who is that man? Well, that's the funeral director. He's done everything short of holding on to cards that he's handing out after the service. Ulterior motives can get the better of us anytime, but we don't fool God. Amen? God knows it all. Every little nook and cranny of our past, our present, He knows our future too. And He lays it out for us in the person of Jesus Christ. The next part of that verse, 23 out of Romans 6, goes like this. But the free gift of eternal life comes to us through who? Jesus Christ. Comes through Jesus Christ. I want to read to you from 1 Corinthians, the 15th chapter. This is Paul talking to the church in Corinth. This is a believing body, quote unquote, right? But in this body, there are those who are questioning the reality, the truth behind the resurrection. And they are saying, well, we're not really sure that there's a resurrection. And Paul says to them, well, if there isn't, then I know that I and all of you who've believed in the resurrection, we are the most to be pitied. But there is a resurrection. There is this truth upon which we stand. It may be a mystery. We may not be totally able to understand it, but it still is nonetheless for us a truth that leads on to victory. Victory is ours when we believe in Jesus Christ and mean it. You can't expect to celebrate the victory if you didn't truly believe in the one who makes that possible. But to those who believe, who say what they mean and mean what they say, this is what Paul tells us is here for us on death and dying. Death is swallowed up in that victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Do we want that victory? We need to be accountable. We need to admit our condition, that the issue is not our dying, but the issue is our sinning. We need to turn. We need to repent of that daily. We need to not quench the Spirit when the Spirit causes us, prompts us to admit our failings in life, our lack of faithfulness, our lack of love towards one another and towards others. We need to admit all of that. We need to stand firm on that, understanding that doing so is not negative but positive, because it leads us, it pushes us into the arms of a loving God who has held us graciously and wonderfully through the death, power, and resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. He is our victory. And where we have victory in Him, death has no sting. Now, going to be anxious about dying? Sure. I think Suzanne said earlier today, no one wants to leave. I don't totally agree with that. There may be a lot of reasons why I want to leave. Now, my family isn't one of them. I mean, I will miss my family when I'm gone. But celebrating the victory in Jesus Christ means that the day will come when I will see them again. That's the power of the resurrection. That's the crucial nature of a sincere belief in the person of Jesus Christ. And admitting that we need Him. Oh, how we need Him. There is no heaven without Him. Stuck in our sin, we go nowhere. But thanks be to God, the sting of death, there is none because of what Jesus has done. Number three. Number three is simply this. We come through those other two. We come to that place where we can be at peace. Peace with ourselves and all of our comings and our goings. Peace in all of the ups and the downs of daily living. Peace as we look forward to that moment when we shake off this human person, this flesh of ours, this skin of ours, this perishable part of ours, and are clothed with that which is imperishable, that doesn't die, that doesn't suffer, that doesn't anguish, that doesn't hurt anymore. Peace. So that, yes, even in the face of the realities of what dying means, we can face it with joy and anticipation for what it is about to bring. Paul, writing to the Philippians in chapter 1, he's writing from prison. It wasn't a good thing. Locked up, unable to be with his brothers and sisters, limited on his mobility and activity. He says this, "Yes, and I will rejoice. For I know that through your prayers and the help of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, this meaning the prison, will turn out for my deliverance, as it is my eager expectation and hope that I will not be at all ashamed, but that with full courage, now as always, Christ will be honored in my body, whether by life or by death." Again, whether by life or by death. For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. To live as Christ is to die is gain. If I am to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me, yet which I shall choose I cannot tell. I am hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better. Was Paul a man who was at peace with his circumstances? Yes. With what was ahead of him? Yes. With the prospect of his dying? Yes. He was at peace with all of that. Why? Because he knew that what Jesus had done for him, the wretched man that he was, that he could look forward in eager anticipation of God snatching him out of this world and clothing him in imperishability. So yeah, we need to be prepared with the trust and with the plans. And my wife, she told me she was going to be watching this today. I know what's going to happen when I get home. Did you listen to him, Shields? We need to schedule an appointment with that man. We could have gotten it for a fraction had we done it when I first told you we should do it. See how this is going? Be prepared. One of the things I have done right, haven't done a lot of things right, but one of the things I have done right is we did purchase a long-term care policy. So if we need to go into a home of some kind, we will not drain our funds, and those funds can still go to the children, because at least we planned for that. If you haven't done that yet, you may want to look into that. A little more costly at our age now, but hey, the more planning we can do, the better. But having all that been said, it still leaves that major piece of unfinished business. Where are we with Jesus? Are we prepared for going home? We're foreigners in this land. We were never intended to be here under these circumstances. God created a perfect world. We screwed it up. Amen? That's why the problem is sin. It's not death. No sin, no death. It's pretty much that simple. That's what the scriptures tell us from Genesis 3 on. There's no sin, there's no death. But now there is death because of sin. But Jesus, following obediently on to the Father, went to a cross. And he died on that cross. But death could not hold him. The grave could not hold him. The devil could not hold him. Nothing could hold him. And on the third day, he was raised up. And because he was raised up, those who would believe in him and in the power of his resurrection can live this life in victory, looking forward to the day when the fullness of that victory will be realized at heaven's gates. And God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit standing there saying, "Come on in, my son. Come on in, my daughter. You're home. You're finally home." I want that for you. I want that for me. I want that for all whom I know. May we, by words and actions, say what we mean and mean what we say. Proclaim there is a victory unto everlasting life, and that victory is in Jesus Christ alone. Amen. Let's pray together. Gracious Father in heaven, it is not an easy thing to talk about this aspect of our life. But the reality is that we started dying the moment we busted forth from the womb. It's just taken a while to get us to where we are. And in reality, where we are right now, it's full of things that we would much prefer not having to deal with. It might be a cancer, it might be arthritis, it might be a heart condition, it might be just counting down the days as the years build up. All of that can be very, very depressing and disconcerting and painful in a multitude of ways. But we stand today, O God, on the promise of your word, that your Son Jesus came and died for us, that believing in him, we might have everlasting life. Fill us anew with your Spirit so that we might accept our accountability, mean what we say, and say what we mean, that we might celebrate the victory and be at peace in you. This is what we look for and claim in your name today. Amen and amen. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you, Jesus. And thank you all for coming. And I hope this has been beneficial to all of you. There is the table in front of us with business cards and brochures and all the kind of printouts. So please come up and help yourselves. And also help yourselves. We have coffee, we have water, and we have some cookies. So help yourselves to that as well. And lastly, there are some offering plates on the tables for any free will donations to Joy. Althea Halchuk is also here, and she is also what she calls herself as a death maven. She does help people at the end of life too, to help them through the process and that kind of thing. And she has left some brochures up here on the table as well, so help yourself to them. Thank you so much for coming.